Today I'm writing another expert advisor based on a strategy suggested by one of our subscribers. The strategy is published on YouTube by ForexSignals TV. I'll add a link in the description below to that video, and anything else that I reference in today's video, there will be links in the description for those. There are some points where the strategy needs interpretation, and also some points where I've simplified the strategy a little in order to make the video less complex, but you'll see those as we go through the code. Now, the code that I'm going to write today in this expert advisor is also available for download, and there will be instructions in the description again below this video. I won't be doing a full description of the strategy here because it is in the ForexSignals video, and I encourage you to watch that to fully understand the strategy. But in summary, this strategy uses a higher time frame chart to get a confirmation direction of the trend, and then looks for pullbacks into a moving average channel on the lower time frame chart. And by default, the strategy uses a 1 hour as the higher time frame chart, which the author calls an anchor chart, and so I use that terminology also, and then the 5-minute chart for trading. The pullback into the channel on the current chart sets up a trigger for a trade, and then the trade is executed when the price moves beyond a high or low of recent price action. I'll also be using some include files that I built up in recent videos to basically encapsulate the differences between MQL4 and MQL5, so that in this video I won't have to talk about differences. But I won't be going into the detail of how those include files work, so again, links in the description to those earlier videos. Since the strategy uses 2 time frames, I will include code to deal with the second time frame, but you may want to look at an earlier video that I have produced in terms of how you can access those higher time frame values from your experts and indicators. So I'm starting in the MT5 editor, MQL5 here. I will be using the libraries from the Common Toolbox, and as I said earlier, there will be links in the description to that. Here's the Common Toolbox under Include Orchard Common Toolbox, and I have the indicators files and the trade files here. I'm writing this for both MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. So in the editor, I've got the MQ4 open and the MQ5. And as the normal practice that I do when I'm writing something for both, I'm putting the bare minimum into the MQ4 and the MQ5 files, and everything else that's common between the two will be in an include file, and that's this simple scalper.mqh include file. So to start with the MQ4 file, all I have are the basic properties, copyright link version, and property strict, and then the include file. For the MQ5 version, copyright link version, there is a property strict here, but that's because I've just copied this header from the MQ4. It's not needed, and it will be ignored by the compiler for MQ5. And then just the include simple scalper.mqh. These property statements do need to be in the MQ4 or MQ5 file because the compiler will ignore them in other places. So now the MQH file, the include file that will contain all of the code. And I'm going to be just working through this from top to bottom. So there will be places where I refer to functions that won't appear until later in the code. So first, just a simple comment block. I duplicate these properties inside the include file. They are ignored by the compiler, but I just like to have them there because it helps me with my own documentation. I also like to include a comment in here somewhere that simply lists out the steps of the strategy. And now, because I'm using the Common Toolbox, I have this one include statement that brings in the trade files. So now I declare 2 variables, trade, which is of type C trade custom, and position info, that's of type C position info custom. And you will need to see the earlier videos if you haven't seen them already to explain how these 2 files work. But now I have an object called trade and an object called position info, and the trade object is what I'll be using to place trades, and the position info object is what I'll be using to monitor my existing position. Now, this strategy calls for me to set target entry points and exit points, and rather than use buy stop or sell stop, I'm actually going to store those values of the entry and exit points in memory, and I'm going to store them in a structure. So I'm creating this structure that I'm calling S target price. So as I go through the strategy and process, each time I detect a potential entry, I'll store the type, buy or sell, the price where I want to enter the trade, and the stop loss and take profit associated with that trade. I could have made these simple global variables, but instead I'm just preferring to have a structure, and then I'll have a global variable that is of type that structure, and it will then have the elements which are type, entry price, stop loss and take profit. And now these are all standard inputs. The strategy actually specifies the time frames and types of the moving averages, but I actually like to include those as inputs because it does let the user change them as they see fit. If they have a variation on the strategy, I just want to use different settings. So I prefer to include them here, and that's more flexible. So first the anchor variables, and as I've said, anchor is the term that the author uses for the higher time frame chart, and the strategy does default to a 1 hour chart, which I'm using as the default for the input, but I am letting you change that value. And then of course there is a fast and a slow moving average on that chart. And so for both of those, I have inputs of the period, the method, and the applied price. And now on the main chart, or at least the chart where we're processing this, which should be a 5-minute chart, I have 3 moving averages, fast, medium, and a slow. So for each of those moving averages, I have a period, a method, and an applied price. Now the strategy calls for looking back through earlier candles to find either the high or low of those candles, and so this is the look back that I'm setting here, and by default the strategy says to look at the 5 previous candles. And then having found that high or low of the previous candles, the strategy also calls for setting the entry points using an offset from the top or bottom of those candles, depending if we're looking at the high or the low. So this is my offset points, and this entry is in points, so I'll have to convert that later to an actual price value. Now the take profit stop loss ratio. Once the stop loss has been determined, which is done by looking at the previous candles, then I'm simply saying here by default I will take profit at 1.25 times that stop loss. And now the usual inputs: how big is the order size, a magic number, and a trade comment, which I'm defaulting to the file name here using the _ file __. Now, as I said, the offset is specified in points in the input. I have declared here a double type global variable called gEntry offset, where I'll calculate that 30 points into the actual price size. And now again, going back to the common toolbox, I'm including the indicator MA include file, which will store the moving average indicator that can be used by both MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. And because I have 3 moving averages on the main chart and 2 on the anchor chart, I'll actually be declaring 5 of these moving average variables. So those 5 are the fast and slow anchor and the fast, mid and slow on the main. And now I mentioned that I declared a structure of type S-target, or a structure called S-target price, and here's my global variable that will hold that. And now the onInit function. And now I just have included a test to see that the anchor time frame specified in the inputs is larger than the time frame of the current chart. And I'm using the period seconds on the input anchor time frame, which tells me how many seconds there are obviously in 1 unit of that anchor time frame, and on the same for the period of the current chart. So I'm saying if you specify an anchor time frame that is shorter than the current period, then that will result in an error. Let me wrap that around, but this is using the print format, so it will replace the placeholders. My message is just, you must select an anchor time frame higher than the current chart. Current equals %s, which is a string placeholder, and selected is also a %s. Let me just wrap this around to make it a little easier to see. And then I'm using the enum to string of the 2 time frames, the period and the anchor time frame, just to show you what's been entered. And then I simply return a failure response. And here's the point where I'm converting the offset points from the input, that 30 points, into an actual price size, and I'm doing that by multiplying that input points by the size of a single point, which I get with the symbol info double function, passing the current chart symbol and the argument symbol underscore point. And that gives me the G entry offset value. The trade object, or the object of type ctrade custom, doesn't accept magic number as an input to placing a trade. It must be set once on the object. So here I call trade.setExpertMagicNumber and the magic number from the input. And now my 5 moving averages. So this is the fast anchor chart moving average. For each of these, I'm going to call the init method, and the arguments for these are all going to be the chart symbol, the time frame. So for the 2 anchors, this will be the input anchor time frame, and for the 3 for the main chart, they will be the current chart time frame. And then the period, method, and applied price for the appropriate moving average. So that's the slow anchor moving average, and you can see the only difference here is that I've used the slow period, the slow method, and the slow applied price. And now the 3 moving averages for the scalping chart, and here the difference, of course, I've used the period from the current chart, and I'm still using the period fast method, or the period method, and applied price as specified in the inputs. And so that's defined my 5 moving averages. New bar is one of the functions that we'll see later, but that simply tells me if I've just opened a new bar, and it does that by testing the open time for the current candle. I'm calling that once so that it effectively resets it, and it doesn't allow me to start this expert in the middle of a candle. It will wait until at least 1 new bar forms. And now I'm just initializing that target value. So I'm using entry price of 0 to mean no target has been set. And then just return init succeeded. Now the onDinit doesn't really need to be here. I'm leaving it in just for documentation, but there is nothing in this function. Now Now in the onTick section where we'll be doing the processing, or in the onTick function where we'll be doing the processing, I have a number of tests to determine whether this expert is currently allowed to trade. For any number of reasons it may not be able to trade, and there are several functions I need to call to test that. If the expert simply can't trade, there's no point in going any further, so I'll test each of these conditions at the beginning of this onTick function and exit if I can't trade. And so these are testing whether automated trading is allowed at the terminal level, at the expert level, and whether the account is allowed to trade automatic experts, or whether trading is allowed on the account at all. And now the new bar function, because I only want to process new entries once per bar. So this is saying if not new bar, so if we're in an existing bar, then I want to process to see if we've hit those trigger points. I'm going to be doing that by calling a single function that's called open at target. So if the price hits the target price, then this will trade. And the target price in the initialization was set to 0, so that will simply exit until we reach a point where that trigger is set. And we'll be getting to that soon. And so all of this condition says if we're not in a new bar, then test whether we need to open a trade and then return. And the rest of this code will only be executed once per bar, because it will only be executed if the new bar is true. So first thing I'm doing, position info. This is the custom class that we created, position info.count. And the arguments to that are the symbol and the magic number. So this will simply count the number of open trades or open positions for this symbol and magic number. And if that's greater than 0, return. And that's because I only want one trade to be open at a time. And now another function that will be written further on, wait for HTF. So I'm waiting for the higher time frame. And this is because MetaTrader may not have loaded the data for that higher time frame. It will have the data loaded for the currently open chart, but if I then refer to a 1 hour chart and that 1 hour chart is not open, that data may not have been downloaded to the terminal. So this wait for higher time frame will attempt to retrieve data, and if it's not available, we'll cycle through a number of iterations until that data is available. But so as not to hold the terminal up indefinitely, if this fails, so if it returns without retrieving the higher time frame data, then I'll get a return value of false. So if not, wait for higher time frame, then return. So I'm simply saying if I can't get the higher time frame data, there's nothing more I can do right now. Exit and just wait for the next bar to open. So here I'm gathering data about the anchor chart. I need the fast and the slow moving average, so anchor fast, anchor slow, and I need the current close price. The strategy isn't clear on whether I should just be using the close price or the entire bar, but it does say that the current price needs to be on the same direction as the fast from the slow, or rather the slow, fast and current price need to be aligned. So first test, if the fast anchor value is greater than the slow anchor value, then that's a possible buy because the faster moving average is above the slow moving average. But then if the close price for the anchor is less than the fast, I'll return. Because if I'm in a buying mode with the fast above the slow, then the close must also be above the fast. So if close is less than fast, I'll return. And if I get through to this statement, then I set the anchor mode to be buying mode. Now this is just telling me which direction the anchor chart is suggesting. It's not telling me that I'm going to buy yet. And then I'm doing the reverse. I don't need to test anchor fast compared to anchor slow. because that's obviously the opposite of this condition. But I do test if the anchor close is above anchor fast. So by getting into this else statement, I know that the fast is already less than or equal to the slow. And if the anchor is, if the close is greater than the fast, then I don't have a signal and I'll just return there. But if I get through to this statement now, then I'm in a selling mode. Okay, so here I'm going to be gathering information from the currently open chart, and I want to see that the direction indicated by the 3 moving averages on this current chart match the direction indicated on the anchor chart. So first I need to get the moving average values, and these are all just done with the same function as before, but in each case I'm calling the object MA main fast, where before I was calling MA anchor fast and MA anchor slow. So these are the object values that I set up earlier, and I'm just calling the get value function for bar number 1 for each of these. So I have the fast, the mid, and the slow moving average values from the current open chart. And I also have the close using the iClose function for the current symbol and period for bar number 1. But because the triggers are set based on the high or low values penetrating the fast moving average, I also need the high values and the low, and that's just I high or I low on this symbol, period, and bar number 1. Now this confirmation isn't specifically mentioned, as I could see in the video talking about the strategy, but I'm assuming that the 3 moving averages on the current chart need to match the direction of the anchor chart. So the first test, if the fast moving average is greater than the mid moving average and the mid moving average is greater than the slow moving average, then that tells me that the main chart is in buying mode. And because the main chart is in the buying mode, if the anchor mode is not buying, then I'm just going to return because the anchor chart doesn't agree with the current chart. I'm also then testing if the main close is less than or equal to the main slow. Now this is mentioned in the strategy. It's saying that if the price closes on the wrong side of the slow moving average, then if we already have a trigger set, cancel it. Certainly we don't open a new trigger. And so cancelling a trigger is just setting the entry price on this target structure to 0. So anytime the entry price is 0, it means I don't have a current trigger. And then I return. And now I'm looking for the price having pulled back into that area of the fast moving average. So because this is in a buying mode, I've already determined that, then it means that if the low price of the bar that's just closed, bar number 1, is less than or equal to the fast moving average. Now the strategy doesn't care how far back, this is just the low price. As long as the close isn't below the slow, then it doesn't matter how far the low price is below the fast moving average. Now if that passes, so if the low price has gone inside or equal to the fast, so we've had a touch there, then I'm calculating an entry price. And to do this, I'm getting the high value for the current symbol and time frame. I'm using I highest to find which bar number I want that high price from, and again with current chart symbol and period. Looking at mode high and looking through my entry look back, and this 2 instead of a 1. The look back that the strategy describes, and as I saw described on the whiteboard in the video, show me counting back for 5 bars, beginning with the bar before the bar that just closed, which would be bar number 2. So I'm going from bar number 2 for 5 bars back. Let me reformat this a little so it might be easy to read. Right, so the iHigh function takes 3 arguments: the symbol, the time frame, and a bar number. And the bar number is being given to us here using the iHighest function, which finds the bar number that has the highest value using the high prices, using the symbol, time frame, for 5 bars beginning at bar number 2, because my look back is by default 5. And then we also have that offset, so I'm simply saying entry price plus equals the entry offset. So we've penetrated the fast moving average. We're in a buying mode. The price has gone inside the fast moving average. I've calculated the entry price as being the highest price for 5 bars before the bar that just closed, plus 30 points. Now the exit price, which is my stop loss price, is offset from that low value minus the entry offset. So that's a simple calculation. And the take profit price is based on a ratio of the distance from the entry to the exit price. So here it's just entry price plus, because we're in buying mode, and then the difference between the entry and exit price multiplied by the ratio that we input earlier, which was 1.25. Now the strategy as it's described calls for placing this order and taking half at a certain target and then letting the other half run, or closing based on a trailing stop. I'm ignoring that second part and I'm simply going to have a single exit. I have an earlier video, which I'll also reference in the description, that shows how I would typically process strategies that have partial close. And I do that by actually opening up 2 trades. But in this example, and to keep the video short, I'm only going to open up 1 trade. So we're only using the single target, as I say here in the comment, single target where the strategy has 2 target prices. So having calculated those, I simply assign the entry price to the target structure entry price. I assign the stop loss and the take profits to the target structure. And the type is anchor mode, which in this case is order type buy. And now the else statement, because the first condition was for fast greater than mid and mid greater than slow. But I can't simply say if that's not true, because the 3 lines may be intertangled. So I now have to do the opposite condition, fast less than mid and mid less than slow. And that would be a selling mode. Same condition here though, if that selling mode doesn't match the anchor mode, so if the anchor mode is not already order type sell, then I would return. And again, if the main close price has closed above the slow value because we're in a selling mode, then I need to reset those targets. And now I'm testing for a pullback, but in this case I'm testing to see if the high has pulled back above or equal to the fast moving average. I'll reformat that again to make it easier. So same condition, but in this case I'm looking for the low using the symbol and period, and the low price from the lowest bar, and that's using lowest for symbol, period, using mode low, so I'm checking the low prices, look back, comma 2. So still starting at bar number 2 and looking back for 5 bars. But in this case, entry price minus equals entry offset because I'm looking for an entry offset below that price. My exit price now is above the entry price, so it's the high value from the bar that's just closed, main high, plus the entry offset. Now the take profit price calculation is the same as it was for the buy side, simply because exit price minus entry price is now going to be a negative number, so we're still using plus entry price plus this difference, and that will give me the take profit price. After that, I just assign those values to the G target the same way that I did for the buy side. And now a final else condition. So what we've covered here are cases where the main chart moving averages are aligned either in the buy side or in the sell side, but the strategy itself doesn't mention what happens if they're not aligned. So if the fast moving average is perhaps between the mid and the slow. Now, because it's not mentioned, I'm simply not going to do anything. If we already have a target set, that means it will be left there, so I'm not resetting the target. And if we don't have a target set, then obviously nothing changes. You may want to change this and reset the target. If you do, then simply set that entry price to 0 in here. But because it's not mentioned in the strategy, I'm not doing anything here at all. Now, it is possible that after going through this code and setting a target, if the price is at the extreme end of those most recent bars, that we are already at a point where we need to open a trade. So I'm just going to call the open at target function. That's the same function that I call at the very beginning here. And that will detect whether the current price has moved past our entry point. So if the current price is already above the entry price on a buy trade or below the entry price on a sell trade, then this will force it to open immediately. And that's the end of the onTick function. And now the open at target function, the first thing I do in here is check that entry price. As I said, entry price of 0 means there is no target set or no trigger set. So if target.entry price is equal to 0, then I'm simply returning immediately. So if I'm in a buying mode, so if that structure G target type is order type buy, then I'm going to be buying based on the ask price. So if symbol ask, which is another function that we'll see later, is greater than or equal to the entry price. So now the ask price has moved above the entry price, and that means that I want to open a trade. So I'll call yet another function that we'll see soon, just called open trade. And then once that trade's been opened, I reset the entry price to 0 so that I don't open any more trades until the target is reset. And now this else statement, I've said G target type equals order type buy there. It can only be buy or sell. So this else statement means that we're now in selling mode. And in this case, I'm testing symbol bid, another function that we'll see soon. If the bid price has moved below the target.entry price, then I want to open a trade again. And again, reset the entry price so that we don't place any further trades. And now the open trade. And this is quite simple now that I have the common class between MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. And it simply opens a trade based on the information in the G target structure. I've built in this test again. I shouldn't get to this point if the entry price is equal to 0, but I've just built this test in again. If the entry price is 0, I'll simply return. Now, as I say here, it's not necessarily to pull these values out of the structure. I just think it's a little easier to read. So rather than referring to gtarget.type, I'm simply going to pull it out to a variable called type. It's up to you. You can simply use gtarget.type in the code. Now I'm pulling out the price and using the normalized double function on that, and this forces the price into a structure of number of digits that are acceptable to the platform by applying the size of digits. So this digits function will return the number of digits for the current chart symbol. And I'm taking the entry price and applying normalized double to get my price. Then I do the same for the stop loss and the take profit. And then I can call the position open function on the trade object. Now this is a trade object. It's of type ctrade custom, which in the case of MetaTrader 5 will be of type ctrade, and in MetaTrader 4 will be a custom written function. And they are inside that library that is referenced in the description. But the arguments to that are just the symbol, the type here, which is buy or sell, order size from the inputs, price, stop loss, take profit, and the trade comment. And that returns a Boolean value, so I'm saying if not, which means it failed. And if it failed, I just print an error message. Now the new bar function. This is simply testing to see if between the last time this was called and now a new bar has opened. And I use this quite a lot, but I declare a static date time variable, which I'm calling prevTime, and I initialize that to 0. The initialization only happens the first time this function is called, or the first time this application is opened. And that's the purpose of the static keyword here. This will retain the value that it held last time this function exited. And then I'm declaring another date time called now, which holds the opening time for the current symbol and period. And then if the two of those, if the opening time for the current bar is the same as the previous time, then I just return false because we don't have a new bar. And if not, then I set prevTime equal to now and return true because we do have a new bar. Now here's the wait for higher time frame. And as I described, when you're using a time frame on a chart that may not be showing in MetaTrader, then the values for those prices may not exist in the terminal. So they have to be downloaded. And the first time you make this call, you may find that the information simply doesn't exist. So this is just going to wait until that information is available, and the two arguments are the symbol and the time frame. And so by default in here, I'm going to wait up to 10 times. So wait count equals 9. As long as wait count is greater than or equal to 0, wait count minus minus. So I'm using a simple loop, and inside this loop I'll exit as soon as there's no longer any need to wait. And to test whether the data is available, I've declared a date time. I'm just calling it T, and I'm using the iTime function to get the opening time for the passed in symbol and the passed in time frame for bar number 0. In case that's not successful, I'm capturing the error number using the getLastError function, storing that in ERR. I'm not using that at the moment, but at least that's there in case you want to use it. What I'm actually testing is to see whether the value of T returned is greater than 0. A value of 0 means it was unable to get the time for the current bar, and so T would be 0. So as long as T is greater than 0, then I can return true. I won't go through any more iterations of this loop, and it means that I have all the information up to bar number 0. And if not, I'm just going to sleep for 100 milliseconds and then try again. If I get through this loop for all 10 iterations without being able to get back the time for bar number 0, then I'll return false, which says that I don't have the higher time frame data available. And now just two small functions to give me the buy and the bid and the ask prices. So symbol ask just uses the symbol info double function, passing the chart symbol and using the symbol ask to get the ask price for the current symbol. And symbol bid the same, but using symbol underscore bid. That's the complete include file for the simple scalper. I'll go to the MQ5 file and make sure I haven't made a typing error. That's compiled, and I'll need to go to MetaTrader 4 to compile the MQ4 version. Now in the MetaTrader 4 editor, I have Simple Scalper MQ4 open. This is the same Simple Scalper MQH file. I'll just compile this, and that also compiled. If you found the video today useful, then please click the like button. The next video will be on how to write log files in various formats from MetaTrader. If you'd like to see that and any other videos we release in the future, then click the subscribe button, and if you click the bell icon, then you'll be notified when we release those videos. So until next time, thank you for watching.